Hey guys, tonight we're slipping quietly behind the curtain of glitter and smoke machines, straight into a dream woven from sequins, moonlight, and the soft shimmer of a sock. You're not stepping into an ordinary story tonight, you're entering the world of Michael Jackson. You land right in the middle of flashing cameras, velvet-curtained dressing rooms, and that unmistakable scent of hairspray mixed with ambition. There's music in the air, tight harmonies from the Jackson 5 echoing down the hallway, and through a half-open door, a 10-year-old boy spins with all the gravity of someone who already knows he's going to change the world. He's wearing socks. Not just any socks. White cotton, pulled snug and clean, but somehow they already have a little flair. A flicker. A hint of something bigger coming. You're about to follow a life that soared beyond comprehension. But let's be real, you probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes in this kid's shoes. Early mornings, label pressure, vocal drills that make your throat tighten just thinking about them. And when most kids were learning cursive, Michael was mastering his pitch at the edge of exhaustion. You're in Gary, Indiana, 2300 Jackson Street. The floorboards creak under your feet. The house is small, and the living room doubles as a rehearsal studio. Joe Jackson's voice cuts sharp through the air, pushing, correcting, demanding perfection. You stand near the corner as 5 brothers snap into motion. Jermaine glances sideways. Tito's fingers slide over guitar strings. And Michael? Michael's in his own zone. Even at this age, his rhythm is uncanny, his timing almost eerie. He moves like he already knows he's being watched by people not even born yet. And while his brothers are decked in matching polyester, you catch Michael glancing down at his socks, adjusting them. It's a small thing, barely noticeable, but even then, he's particular about the little details. A local show, a chance to get noticed. The boys are lining up to sing "I Want You Back," and Michael is bouncing slightly on his heels. You catch it, that flash of clean white just above his black loafers. Not flashy, not sequined, just bright. Brighter than the others. Turns out he asked his mother, Catherine, if she could bleach his socks one extra time that week. They look better when I spin. Here's the thing most people miss. Before the moonwalk, before the glove, before the fedora tilt that made millions scream, Michael understood the value of a flicker. Something that caught the eye at exactly the right moment. It started with socks. That tiny, controlled glint below the ankle. He wanted your eye to follow his foot, not just his face. Biographers still wonder whether this was instinct or calculation. Did a child that young already understand visual rhythm? Or was it just luck, that his need to feel clean on stage turned into a visual trademark? Meanwhile, backstage life was anything but sparkly. You peek into the hotel rooms, shared beds, tangled extension cords, mismatched costumes sewn by Catherine in motel bathrooms. And in all that chaos, there's Michael, refolding his socks, aligning the edges. It's oddly tender, a ritual before sleep. One left-right pair for performance, one fuzzy pair for the cold hotel floor. Joe didn't like distractions. He once slapped Michael's hand away for adjusting his socks mid-interview. But Michael kept doing it. Quietly, persistently, like the socks were his silent way of holding on to control in a life ruled by everyone else. And the socks began evolving. One day in 1971, while filming an interview, a wardrobe assistant tried handing Michael a pair of plain gray socks. "These don't bounce," he whispered, handing them back. "You got white?" She laughed, thought he was joking. But no, he had learned. The bounce mattered, because when he spun, he wanted time to pause. A blink, a shimmer, then boom, the drop. The years passed, and with them, the costumes got wilder. Collars grew wider, but the socks, always precise, always intentional. You start to notice it now, don't you? The way his foot lands first in any routine. It's like the sock is the starter pistol. And here's your quirky fact of the night. Catherine Jackson kept a Ziploc bag labeled M socks show in the laundry room for decades. Inside, 7 identical pairs. No labels, but she knew which ones were stage-worthy. You could tell by how tightly they folded back into place. You follow the boys to Los Angeles. A new house, brighter lights, fame swelling faster than their voices can keep up. But Michael? He's still that kid who adjusts his socks in the mirror, who adds an extra step during rehearsal just to see how the light catches, who studies Fred Astaire tapes not for the dance, but for how the socks glide across the floor. Sometimes you wonder, did Michael choose the socks, or did the socks choose him? There's one moment, late night, sitting alone in the studio, that sticks with you. He's not singing, he's just tapping his foot, watching his reflection, the soft squeak of fabric against tile. He nods once, satisfied. He doesn't say it out loud, but you know, the sock passes the test. You're standing in the corner of a dim living room again, this time in a different house. Bigger, brighter, and covered in shag carpet. It's the early 70s, and everything is orange, wood-paneled, and humming with ambition. Michael is a teenager now. His voice is changing, but his instincts? Sharper than ever. You're watching him pace in front of the TV, eyes fixed on Soul Train. The Jackson 5 are about to perform, and he's unusually quiet. On the screen, the crowd cheers. Studio lights beam. Jermaine smiles for the camera. But Michael, in his bell-bottoms and silky shirt, does something subtle. Right before the music kicks in, he tugs the hem of his pants up just an inch, revealing, yes, his socks. Not just any socks. Crisp white, ribbed, pulled snug above gleaming loafers. And as he begins to dance, the light finds them instantly. You blink. The audience claps. But it's the socks you can't stop watching. Backstage in the dressing room after the taping, he's sitting cross-legged on a couch, dabbing his forehead with a tissue. A friend teases him. "You always wear the same socks, man. Don't you get bored?" Michael grins. "You don't change what works," he says, then tosses the tissue like it's confetti. That's the thing. He's not being ironic. He truly believes in the magic of repetition. The sock isn't just an accessory now. It's a signal. A quiet announcement that something special is about to happen. And here's the kicker. These weren't high-end socks. At least, not at first. Michael used to beg Catherine to buy specific ones from a corner shop in Encino, the kind with reinforced toes and a bit of sheen when washed right. Not satin, not silk, just good, old-fashioned white cotton with a secret gleam under the spotlight. Biographers still debate whether this was fashion genius or adolescent superstition. Was it a branding decision in disguise, or just a kid clinging to something he could control, when everything else, from tour schedules to school tutors, was out of his hands? Now you're in a different hallway, a long one, lined with gold records. Michael walks ahead of you, humming softly to himself. He's wearing pajama pants and socks. Yes, those socks. The ones with the tiny, worn-out soles. There's a piece of tape on the left heel. He stops, mid-step, and chuckles. "Stevie Wonder says he could hear my socks coming," he says deadpan. They make a sound. You listen. They do. A slight whisper on tile. A brush of cotton on rhythm. You realize it's not just about looks. These socks sound like performance. You pass a rehearsal room. Tito's tuning up. Randy's chewing gum with a bored expression. But Michael? He's spinning, over and over, watching his socks in the mirror with every turn. He's not checking his face, not his hands, just the motion of white flash beneath the cuffs. This time, the light hits just right. The white arcs across the floor like a comet. He smiles. He doesn't need anyone's applause to know when it works. One of his choreographers later said Michael had laser focus on the stupidest stuff, like sock angles. But that's exactly what made him who he was. It's the difference between good and perfect. You can rehearse a song 100 times, but if your foot doesn't catch the light the right way, to Michael, the whole moment failed. And he started tweaking everything to serve the sock. Pants were tailored shorter, Stage lights were adjusted lower. Floors were waxed differently to enhance glide. There's even a rumor, never confirmed, that he had a clause in a venue contract demanding a specific wattage just to make his socks pop on camera. And here's a weird little fact for your collection. At one point in 1975, he wrote in a journal, "Socks must smile before I do." No context, just that. Like a fortune cookie from another dimension. You're in his bedroom now, or well, the latest one. The walls are covered in posters. Charlie Chaplin, Fred Astaire, James Brown. His bed isn't made. There are socks on the windowsill, drying in the breeze. He walks past you, barefoot this time, holding one white sock in his hand like it's made of glass. He places it on the bed with care, adjusts it, turns it slightly, then steps back, admiring it like it's a painting. He says, mostly to himself, "That's the one. This isn't just teenage vanity. This is spiritual." You can't help but wonder, was this just another armor piece? Something quiet and reliable when fame was loud and unpredictable? Biographers still wonder. Some say the socks were his way of staying grounded, literally. A tether to earth in a career designed to defy gravity. You step outside with him. The sun is high. Kids are playing basketball across the street. Michael waves, then looks down. Tiny dirt smudges on his sock. "No," he mutters, disappearing inside. He returns 3 minutes later in a fresh pair, smiling, ready to rehearse. That's the moment you get it. It was never just about socks. It was about intention, about making every inch of his presence tell a story, even if that story started just above the ankle. You're at the edge of a television studio now, just outside the reach of a swirling disco light. It's the mid-1970s, and Soul Train is on fire. The music is funkier, the hair is bigger, and the spotlight is still chasing one very specific pair of white socks. You slide into the scene with Michael just as the warm-up DJ spins the Jacksons' newest track. Michael's older now, more confident, but quieter in person than you might expect. He's in full stage gear, adjusting the hem of his pants again with that same familiar motion. Pull, smooth, tiny half-tug. Just enough to reveal the socks. He calls over a lighting guy. "Can you give me about 15% more sparkle off the floor, right here?" He points. Not to his face, not to the camera, but to the floor. Right where his right foot will land on beat 3. The crew guy laughs, thinks he's kidding. Michael doesn't smile. Here's what you might not know. The shimmer of his socks was choreographed, not just worn, designed into the steps like punctuation in a sentence. The angle of his spin, the tilt of his foot, the way the fabric flexed with a toe tap, it was all built around creating micro moments of optical magic. Tonight, they're filming a special episode. Michael's got new socks on. They're layered, white cotton underneath, and over that, a mesh of tiny rhinestones hand-stitched in rows that catch light like a disco ball whispering. He called them ankle fireworks. You watch him rehearse the opening combo, a slide, a stop, a pivot, a snap. The socks hit the light at each beat, like they've rehearsed too. And here's your quirky fact of the night. Michael used to nickname his socks. Not all of them, just the ones he wore on big TV nights. The pair he's wearing today? He's named them Spark and Shine. You hear him whisper it under his breath like a quiet superstition. "Come on, Spark, let's go Shine." Some biographers say it was a way of calming his nerves, turning performance anxiety into play. Others think it was a coded method of storytelling. After all, if he couldn't always express what he felt, he could name it, fold it, wear it, and dance it. The countdown begins. You're standing just behind the camera crew as Don Cornelius introduces them. "Ladies and gentlemen, the Jacksons." Music explodes, lights sweep the floor, and there it is. Michael launches into motion, a blur of perfectly timed steps. But your eye, like every viewer watching at home, goes straight to the socks. It's not a mistake. They glitter, they lead, they announce each move before his body even finishes it. The performance ends. Applause rains down. He bows, and as the camera fades to commercial, you watch Michael quietly crouch in the corner, lifting one foot and examining the sock heel. There's a tiny tear, barely visible. He frowns like a disappointed stage manager. You follow him off stage into the green room, where someone from wardrobe offers him gold ones. Flashier. Flashiest, actually. He shakes his head. Too loud. They don't dance, they just shout. And he meant it. Michael didn't just wear sparkle, he controlled it. Down to the reflection radius of each sequin, down to the movement range of his ankles. There's a story Quincy Jones used to tell. During a break in the Destiny album sessions, Michael spent 20 full minutes staring at his sock in a mirror, adjusting a single fold so that the slant was happier. No one knew what that meant. They just nodded and let him keep folding. There's a quiet pressure building behind his career now. He's not just a cute kid anymore. He's a teenager with something to prove. And perfection is the only language he trusts. The socks? They're no longer comfort items. They're co-performers. You're back at his home studio now. Catherine is folding laundry in the next room, humming softly. Michael sits on the floor, cross-legged, surrounded by socks. Different textures, different weights, some with silver threads, some with just enough stretch to allow for a mid-air spin. He tries one on, does a little tap, shakes his head, tosses it aside. He's not choosing an outfit, he's selecting rhythm. Here's where the cultural debate comes in. Some fashion historians credit Michael with revolutionizing men's stage wear. They say his decision to elevate socks to stardom, quite literally, shifted how male performers used accessories. Others argue it was just a byproduct of stage lighting and camera work, and Michael's obsession was an overreaction. But when you're watching him dance in real time, you know they're wrong. There's intent in every toe flick. Every bounce is calculated. And that tiny shimmer? It's no accident. It's choreography. You ride along to a record signing event the next day. Fans scream, security scrambles, and Michael, cool as ever, waves in his signature loafers and you know what underneath. Someone near the front of the line yells, "Where'd you get those socks?" He grins, points down. These? These make the music move. A kid tries to give him a pair of blue ones. He accepts them politely, says thank you. But later, you see him hand them off to someone else. Not because he's rude, but because, for him, the white sock isn't just a color, it's a canvas. That night, you sit with him in the back of a tour bus. He's curled up, sketching in a notebook. You peek. It's not lyrics, it's socks, designs, light tests, arrows pointing to seams, notes about slide friction. You'd think it was a NASA schematic, except the mission is moonwalking. And you realize, this whole time, you've been watching a quiet revolution take shape, one hem pull at a time. You're standing in the wings of the Pasadena Civic Auditorium. The date is March 25th, 1983. The air is electric, practically buzzing with something you can't name, but Michael knows exactly what it is. Tonight is the Motown 25, yesterday, today, forever special. And tonight, Michael's about to moonwalk into legend. You're next to him backstage as he buttons up that now iconic black sequin jacket. It catches the light in little bursts, like someone bottled stars and stitched them into fabric. He's calm, unnervingly so, almost too quiet. You watch him slide his right foot into one gleaming black loafer, then the left. Then he reaches into a box, lined in soft blue velvet, and lifts out a pair of socks. They shimmer. Not just sparkle, shimmer, like they're breathing. Silver sequins, hand-stitched over silk, layered atop white cotton for structure. The sequins are sewn diagonally so they scatter light, even when his foot is still. He runs his hand over them gently, like you would pet a sleeping cat. Then he slips them on, one foot at a time, and adjusts them with that same old tug you've seen since Gary. Except this time, the world is watching. He stands, does a tiny test spin on the tile. The socks flicker like flashbulbs. He nods once. Good, he whispers. They catch first. Catch what? You don't ask, because somehow you already know. You follow him toward the stage. People are swarming, crew members, dancers, legends of Motown. But the moment feels suspended, like time is pausing for the sock reveal. He walks out alone for Billie Jean. That first beat hits, and you're suddenly inside the moment that gets replayed across every YouTube generation, every award show tribute, every nostalgic TV segment for the rest of time. But before the moonwalk, there's the ankle. He stands center stage, tips his hat, the music pulses, and then, there it is. The pant leg lifts slightly, just enough for the socks to flash. The crowd gasps. That's the part people forget. The moonwalk didn't happen in isolation. It was built, step by step, illusion by illusion. And the socks were the opening act. Michael understood something most performers didn't. Anticipation is a shape, a rhythm, and he could mold it with a flick of his ankle. That glint of sequin sock, it wasn't accidental. It told the audience, watch this space. And then, boom, he slides, glides, Glide defies gravity. People scream. You're right there as he nails the final pose, arms out, heels down, sock toes pointing toward the future. The lights explode behind him, and the socks shimmer like they've just delivered a prophecy. Backstage, no one can speak. They're stunned. Michael walks past you without breaking stride, towel draped around his neck. He doesn't ask if it went well. He knows. He heads straight to his dressing room, kicks off the loafers, and immediately peels off the socks, folds them once, then again, then slides them into a slim leather pouch labeled MJ, BJ, M25. You wonder if he'll ever wear them again. Spoiler, he won't. Those socks retire that night, sealed away like relics. Later, they'll be insured for millions. One day, they'll sit in a glass case, behind velvet ropes, guarded like crown jewels. But tonight, they're just resting. Here's your quirky tidbit. The inner lining of those exact socks was marked with tiny hand-embroidered letters, L and R, not for left and right, but for lift and rise. Michael had them labeled as emotional cues, because to him, the socks weren't for walking. They were for becoming something else. Some costume historians argue that this performance changed stage costuming forever, that it signaled a new era, where detail mattered more than grandeur, and glitter had a purpose. Others say it was just a gimmick that went viral before viral was a thing. They debate whether it was the socks, the shoes, the spin, the moonwalk, or the mix. But here's the truth you saw with your own eyes. It was all of it. And at the center, a glint of silver at the ankle, timed like a heartbeat. You ride home with him that night. He's tired, but glowing, quietly flipping through the channels in his hotel room while wearing a pair of regular gym socks now. The performance is already being replayed. He watches for a moment, then smiles. I liked how the right one hit first, he says softly. Right one. You rewind in your mind. It did. The right sock caught the light before the left. A microsecond sooner. Just enough to trick the eye. Just enough to make the moonwalk feel like it began before it started. That's no accident. He pulls a notepad off the nightstand and writes a single sentence. R always first. Then he underlines it, twice. You catch a glimpse of the hotel laundry bag in the corner. Neatly folded inside is another backup pair of silver socks, untouched, unchosen. He brought 3. Used 1. The others were just in case the light felt off. That's the level he played at. And now, every kid who's ever tried to moonwalk in their bedroom socks owes a tiny nod to that moment, to those socks, to that glint before the glide. Michael turns off the TV, flips off the lamp, and slides into bed. The room goes quiet, but somewhere in the drawer beside him, those sequined socks sleep like silver ghosts, still holding the memory of the night the world stopped blinking. You're walking through a quiet hallway in one of Michael's many homes now. This one tucked into a hillside, lined with framed fan letters and handwritten lyrics. But you're not here for the records or the gold plaques. You're headed to the closet. Well, not a closet exactly. More like a vault disguised as a walk-in wardrobe. Michael opens the door slowly, and you step into a space that feels more sacred than stylish. There are the jackets, military, rhinestoned, and famously over the top. A row of fedoras, each one angled ever so slightly, as if rehearsed into place. But in the far left corner, behind a full-length mirror and under soft, museum-like lighting, sits a chest. You know what's inside. Michael kneels gently and opens it. It's lined in velvet, padded and perfectly temperature-controlled. And within it, socks. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Each pair is wrapped in silk paper and labeled with tiny tags written in his own looping script. Bad Tour, Opener, Tokyo Solo, Elizabeth's Party, Do Not Bend. You stare. Some are gleaming silver, some are creamy white with single rows of stones. Others have tiny stitching on the inside hem. A few are yellowing, stiff with age. None of them are ordinary. Michael smiles at your amazement. I kept most of them. You never know when the magic comes back. He pulls one pair out, just cotton, clean, lightly worn. First pair I danced in for Quincy, he says. They weren't even that shiny, but I swear, they made me spin better. You hold them like they're glass, light, faintly scented with something nostalgic, fabric softener and cologne and history. And then he says something that sticks. I don't think people realize how private socks are. You wear them closest to the ground. They hold the weight, you know? There's a rhythm to the way he talks about them, like they aren't fabric but characters. He's remembering a performance in Rome, how the stage lights were too blue, so the socks didn't flash. Whole show felt off, like I was dancing without punctuation. You sit down beside him as he sorts a few pairs. Some are audition socks. Some were never worn on stage. And some have notes tucked inside them. Tiny slips of paper with scribbled affirmations like, keep floating and step light, land big. Here's your quirky discovery of the night. Michael had a ritual where, before a major show, he would talk to the socks. He'd lay them out on the floor, crouch beside them and say, we got this. Never loud, just under his breath, like he was asking the fabric for trust. Some say that was superstition. Others say it was the behavior of a man who carried pressure too privately. Biographers have debated for years whether his obsession with socks and with control over their exact appearance was a coping mechanism, or whether it was just artistry. In a world that demanded huge things of him, maybe the smallest choices felt the most sacred. You open a drawer beneath the main chest. Inside, there's a sketchbook. Not of dance moves, not of outfits, just socks. Pages and pages of angles, fabric textures, sequin shapes. One page even has a test of how a sock looks under red versus blue LED light. Each swatch carefully shaded. Beside it, he's written, blue makes it sad, go warm. You flip to a page with handwritten instructions. Loafers must land heel first. Right sock equals sparkle anchor. Never mix cotton plus nylon, sticky spin. White always equals invitation. You blink. You're not reading notes. You're reading choreography in disguise. Back in the main room, you notice a shelf above the jackets. It holds a few fan gifts, and nestled among them is a framed photo of his feet mid-dance. Silver socks caught mid-air, toes pointed, one sequin mid-flare. It's signed in silver ink, to the ones who always noticed. He once said that socks were the heartbeat of the move, that before the hip pops, the spin twists, or the music hits that downbeat, it's the sock that signals intention. The sock that tells the audience, this is about to matter. That night, you sit with him on the floor, the chest still open. He holds a pair up to the light, ones he wore on the Bad Tour. These made me feel like lightning, he whispers. You ask why he kept so many. He shrugs. Because people keep the wrong things. They keep the trophies, the headlines, but I keep the stuff that made me feel like I could fly. You pause. That lands hard. Then he chuckles, leaning back against a wall of glittering jackets. Besides, I gotta keep them out of the laundry. The maids don't know the rules. And here's your gentle laugh for the night. Apparently, one of his assistants once accidentally bleached a pair of rehearsal socks, ruining the exact texture he'd trained with. He didn't yell, didn't scold, he just looked heartbroken. Those were my warm-up twins, he'd said, and canceled rehearsal for the afternoon. You close the chest gently. The socks settle like stories tucked into a drawer. And for a moment the room feels quieter, as if all those tiny flashes of light, those little sparkles from decades of shows, are still floating around in the air, waiting. You're sitting cross-legged on a cold rehearsal studio floor now, somewhere in LA, maybe New York, maybe London. It doesn't matter. They all start to blur together after a while, and so does the time. Michael's already been rehearsing for hours, drenched in sweat, loafers off to the side, and his socks still sparkling. You've seen this move before, the foot slide, the pop, the sudden stillness. But tonight, something's different. He stops mid-step, frowns, then walks over to a lighting tech and says, "It's off by a half beat, the sock's not hitting." The tech blinks. "The sock?" Michael nods. "When I pivot, the light's supposed to find it. If it doesn't, the audience won't feel the drop." You follow as he walks back to the center of the floor and does it again, and again, and again, until the shimmer lands exactly where it's supposed to. Not on the music, not on the motion, but on the moment. This is no longer about fashion, or flair, or even ritual. This is moonwalk math. Everything is engineered, every movement is calculated down to fractions of a second. Every sock chosen not just for look, but for friction, bend, absorbency, and how it behaves under different wattages. You watch him lean over a notebook, charting angles like a physicist. He draws stick figures, arrows, notes like 2-degree heel lean equals better slide bounce. One page is just a list of socks paired with stages: Wembley, suede grip, Osaka, LED cool tone, white mesh, Madison Square Garden, double layer silver lace. You point at one labeled Apollo with 4 asterisks. "That's the one that never failed," he says without even looking up. Here's your quirky fact. Michael worked with a small tech crew that helped test sock fabrics on different flooring types. They had a laminated chart nicknamed Sock Science that compared how materials like rayon or cotton mixed with polyurethane floors under fog, sweat, and confetti conditions. Yeah, confetti conditions. He once told a tour manager, "I don't moonwalk, the floor lets me slide." And part of that permission came from his socks. Biographers debate to this day whether he truly invented the moonwalk, or whether he perfected an old street move and dressed it in stage magic. But no one argues who made it unforgettable. And Michael knew it wasn't just the motion that made people gasp, it was the illusion, the impossibility of moving without effort. And for that, you needed the right socks. You're back in the studio. He's practicing a spin-to-knee drop transition. The move only works if the foot doesn't stick. He does it 4 times with different socks. The third pair? Too much grip. He actually stumbles, laughs softly. "Okay, you're fired," he says, flinging the sock across the room. He's joking, but only halfway. Because when you're trying to make time pause, every stitch matters. Costume designer walks in carrying samples of new sock designs, pearlescent weaves, matte silvers, some woven with microscopic crystals. Michael fingers them like he's reading Braille. Then he holds them to the light, spins slightly in place, waits to see the shimmer rate. "Too busy," he murmurs. "Looks like they're yelling." You learn quickly, Michael doesn't want loud socks. He wants whispers that explode. He slips on a simpler pair, white base, thin sequin lines, cotton underside. He spins, and the room holds its breath. The light catches, just for a second, but it's enough. "Better," he says. "That one talks." It's moments like this that remind you, the spectacle wasn't random. It wasn't spontaneous. It was a formula. And socks? They were constants in the equation. There's one taped rehearsal where you catch something no one notices at first. Michael's rehearsing the final pose of a medley. He lifts his right foot ever so slightly, holds it, lets the sock glint for just a half beat longer than necessary, then drops. You rewind, replay. That half beat? It's like punctuation at the end of a perfect sentence. That's the sock. That's the flash. That's the full stop. And here's something else few people know. When working with his lighting designer, Michael had a term he used, ankle bloom. It referred to the visual effect of a light sweeping across his foot at the same time he released weight into a step. "I want it to bloom," he'd say, like he was describing a flower, not footwear. You're in the dressing room after a long rehearsal. His socks are off, draped over the arm of a leather chair. He winces, massaging his heel. "Blister," he says casually. "Left side gets hot too early. Might need a thinner arch." That's the other side of the magic, the toll. His team used to joke that he went through more socks than most people went through shoes. But it wasn't waste, it was precision. He once compared a worn sock to an out-of-tune instrument. "Can't make music with the wrong tools," he said. And that's exactly how he saw them. Tools, not garments, not decoration. Instruments. He even had sock doubles for rehearsals. Same weight, different sparkle, so the flash wouldn't wear out during practice. And when you asked why so many layers, he smiled, because if the slide fails, the dream pops. That night, you watch him polish his loafers, not with a brush, but with a soft cloth and focused patience. Beside them, 2 folded pairs of socks, wrapped in tissue like they're going on stage 2. The socks never rest. Even when he sleeps, they're waiting. Quiet, ready to count off the beat. You're standing in a quiet corner of a wardrobe trailer, somewhere between 2 tour stops, probably Kansas City or Munich, it's hard to tell. The curtains are drawn, the dressing lights buzz softly, and Michael's hunched over a folded towel. On top of it, a pair of socks. But tonight, they're not just glittery, they're personal. You move closer and he opens them gently to show you what's inside. A faint silver thread stitched into the inner lining, hidden just above the heel. Tiny letters, not visible from the outside, not meant for cameras, just for him. The thread reads, "You are light, you are rhythm, you are loved." It's so delicate you almost miss it. But Michael doesn't. He reads it softly, under his breath, like a prayer. "These are my lucky ones," he says. "I don't wear them often." You ask who stitched it. He smiles. "Me." Turns out, this wasn't a one-off. As early as the Bad Tour, Michael began quietly customizing his favorite socks. Not for fashion, not for fans, but for emotional grounding. Hidden affirmations, mantras, private reminders. Sometimes it was just a single word, float. Other times, it was a date, a lyric fragment, a scribbled doodle in thread. He once sewed in a tiny moon just above the cuff, invisible unless you turned the sock inside out. "It's for my feet to dream with," he said. Here's your quirky detail of the night. He once tried to sew a small music note into the inside of both heels, but the stitch thread irritated his skin so much during rehearsal that he had to cut the socks off mid-run. From that point on, all stitching was flattened to no more than 0.5 millimeters height. He measured it with a dime. You watch as he folds the socks back up and places them gently in a drawer marked only with a star. The inside is lined with quotes. Taped to the top is a handwritten card that reads, "They'll look at the moonwalk, but they won't know it starts here." You realize then, this hidden detail thing, it's not about superstition, it's about sovereignty. Michael had so little that was his. Not his childhood, not his face in the press, not even his voice in court. But this tiny sacred space between his skin and his stage costume, that was still his. Biographers still argue whether these stitched messages were therapeutic gestures or artistic indulgences. Some call it neurosis, others call it genius. But standing here, seeing the quiet reverence with which he unfolds a single sock like it's a page from a secret diary, you know it's both. He starts showing you others. One pair is stitched with the phrase, "Don't land until they've blinked." Another simply says, "For Mom." A third, marked only with a heart and the word "still." You don't ask what that means. You don't need to. Later that night, during a sound check, you spot him wearing a pair that you know has writing inside. He doesn't say anything, doesn't draw attention, but just before the opening cue hits, he closes his eyes, flexes his toes inside the socks, and whispers, "Stay with me." And just like that, he's ready. You're sitting with a tour dresser backstage once the show starts. She's got an entire kit dedicated just to socks. Emergency backups, lint rollers, mini steamers. You ask her if she ever noticed the messages. She nods. He doesn't want anyone to read them. He just wants them to be there. It's like soul padding. You love that. Soul padding. Turns out there was a quiet system. A color-coded thread rule, even for the inside of the sock. Silver equals focus. Gold equals gratitude. Blue equals protection. Red equals reminder. No one ever confirmed that, but the rumors swirl. Some say he had a seamstress sign a non-disclosure just for sewing the phrase "begin again" into a pair worn during history rehearsals. You're in the hotel room later. He's got his feet up on a velvet ottoman, socks off. You ask him when he started doing it, writing inside his clothes like this. He thinks for a moment. When my world got too loud, I needed something only I could hear. You nod, and then you notice the quiet smile playing on his lips as he folds that lucky pair, heel over toe, crease sharp. A performer's life is built on artifice. But this was real. And here's the moment that makes you pause. He opens a drawer, pulls out a sock still in its original package, untouched. And he says, almost in a whisper, "One day, when I'm gone, someone's going to find this, and they'll feel what I was trying to hold on to." You run your finger across the outer label, just a barcode. But inside, a message waiting to be read. You're pacing just behind the curtains now. Late summer 1984. The Victory Tour is in full swing, and the heat backstage feels like standing inside a giant speaker, bass rattling the walls. Outside, tens of thousands of fans are already screaming. But in this tiny pocket of space behind the stadium stage, Michael Jackson sits very still. He's bent over, carefully adjusting his socks. You've seen him do this 100 times, but something's different tonight. He's not humming, not chatting with the crew. His jaw's tight. The socks, tonight's pair, are silver-threaded mesh over pure cotton. But his hands keep slipping. He pulls them tighter. Again. Again. You kneel beside him. What's wrong? He doesn't answer right away, just stares at his heel. Finally, he says quietly, "They're bleeding." You blink. He lifts the cuff just a little. The edge of a raw blister peeks out, angry, red, already broken open. He winces as the sock brushes it again. You ask if he wants to change the routine, sit out a number, delay the show. He shakes his head. "They're here. I have to give it." The music is starting. He doesn't move. For one terrifying second, you wonder if he's about to collapse. But then he whispers something, soft, rhythmic, almost like a chant. "The light will catch. The light will catch." And with that, he pulls on the second sock, tight over both feet, pain and all. He rises. The opening cue hits, and out he goes. You follow from the wings, heart in your throat, and somehow, he dances like nothing hurts. Spins, glides, moonwalks across a 10-story stage in silver that flashes like a thunderstorm. The socks do their job. They catch the light. They distract the eye from every flinch of pain. The show ends in a roar. But the second he walks off stage, he crumples to one knee. You and two assistants rush over, gently slipping the shoes off, then the socks. He hisses through clenched teeth. Blood has soaked through the cotton, blooming like an ink blot from heel to arch. He winces again. "Don't throw them away." You freeze. "They still worked," he says, voice cracking. So you don't. You rinse them, fold them, wrap them in tissue. He scribbles something on the wrapper before handing it back to you. "Danced on glass, still shined." You keep them. He'll never wear that pair again, but they'll live in a drawer marked Phoenix. That's the name he gives to the socks that broke but still performed. Here's your quirky fact of the night. Michael had a sock classification system not based on size or style, but on memory. He had drawers labeled not by city, but by emotion. Phoenix, rain, orbit, battle, dream. Some he would never wear again. Others he'd reuse, but only on nights that matched the feeling. And yes, rain was a real drawer. That brings you to another moment. 3 weeks later in New Jersey. The weather turns nasty right before a show. The stage is soaked, wind is whipping through the tunnels. Someone suggests postponing. Michael steps out, looks at the sky, then says, "Get the socks from Rain." Everyone knows what that means. They're slightly thicker, woven for grip, subtler in sparkle, with tighter ribbing at the ankle. When he puts them on, he doesn't even flinch. No bandage, no blister tonight. Just a calm breath and the weight of knowing they've worked before. He performs like the storm isn't even happening. He always had an eerie calm right before going on. But you start to notice his body language changes depending on the socks. Some pairs bring focus, some bring comfort, some bring fight. You once watched him cancel a dress rehearsal over a missing sock. Not a pair, a sock. Left side, tagged for a certain medley. When his assistant suggested a replacement, Michael just shook his head. It's not about the look, it's about the spell. That's how he thought of it. Performance is spell casting. And socks? Socks were the wands. You're back in his dressing room a few nights after the bleeding heel moment. He's barefoot, legs up, icing one foot. You ask if he ever thought about dancing barefoot instead. He gives a small, thoughtful smile. "I have," he says. "Sometimes I dream about it. But then, I lose the glide. And the glide is the part that lifts." There's silence for a while. Then he says, "I think pain makes the light flash harder." You think about that. You remember how brightly the socks had glowed that night, how perfectly they caught the flash bulbs while hiding the blood beneath. Biographers still debate if he was addicted to perfection or just allergic to disappointment. Some say he pushed through injuries because he feared being seen as weak. Others think it was deeper, that every show was a debt he was repaying. To fans, to himself, to that little boy from Gary who never got to rest. But you know it wasn't fear. It was a promise, one made not to the cameras, not to the critics, but to his socks. They had to show up, because they always had, and in return, he would too. You ask what happened to that pair. He smiles. They're safe. You think he's talking about the socks, but maybe he's talking about the memory. You're in Tokyo now, late 1987. A cool, misty night hangs over the city like a veil, and neon signs glow through it like futuristic lanterns. Michael's just finished his third straight sold-out show at the Korakuen Stadium. The crowds have finally quieted, but the air still trembles with leftover electricity. He's walking quietly through the backstage corridor, wrapped in a long robe, a towel draped over his shoulders. In his left hand, he's carrying a single sock. Not a pair, just one. It's not new, not freshly sequined. You can tell from the loosened threads and the slightly worn heel that this sock has seen some things. It droops in his grip like a handheld secret. "Tokyo," he says softly, nodding at it like it's an old friend. "She always brings this one back." You follow him into the dressing room. He places the sock carefully on the table, smoothing it out with both hands. The lights overhead catch the faint twinkle of the embedded crystals. Nothing flashy, just quiet shimmer, like moonlight through water. "Wore it the first time I ever felt weightless on stage," he says. You look up, surprised. "The spin during Smooth Criminal," he explains. "I hit the angle, leaned forward, and suddenly, poof, I wasn't touching anything. That sock hit the beat before I did." You laugh, thinking he's joking. He's not. To him, it was real, and it happened in Tokyo. That's why this sock never leaves his side when he's here. He takes a Polaroid camera from his bag, snaps a photo of the sock on the table, then tucks the photo into a worn notebook already bulging with pictures, sketches, and show notes. On the corner of the page, he scribbles in neat handwriting, "Felt like flying." That night, you learn that Michael believes certain cities have sock karma. He had names for each relationship. Paris equals velvet glider. London equals heavy heel. Rio equals Sparkle mischief. Tokyo equals breathless lift. Biographers never mention this, of course. They write about the venues, the ticket sales, the screams, but not the threads. Not the fact that Michael secretly believed cities could charge his socks with different energy. And here's your quirky fact tonight. He actually once asked a stagehand in Tokyo to place his socks under the moonlight for 10 minutes before a performance. "I just want them to absorb a little stillness," he said. The stagehand thought he was kidding. Michael wasn't. The Tokyo sock became legendary in his inner circle. It only had one partner. The right foot sock changed frequently, but the left stayed constant. Why? Because, in Michael's words, the right is for flash, the left is for flight. Tonight, though, he's done dancing. He sets the sock on his bedside table and turns on an old movie. It's Chaplin again. Always Chaplin. The characters flicker on the screen, all black and white and silent whimsy. Michael chuckles once or twice, massaging his ankles. You ask why he doesn't ever let the Tokyo sock retire. He shrugs. It still has one more float in it. You open your mouth to ask if he knows when that float will be, but he's already asleep. The sock stays exactly where he left it, and the next morning, it's gone. Not lost, not misplaced, just moved. Turns out, a member of the Japanese hotel staff had seen it and, not knowing, folded it neatly with the towels. Michael never gets upset, but his face falls. He gently asks the staff to return exactly what they touched. Not to wash it, not to press it, just to bring it back as it was. When they do, he thanks them sincerely, then takes the sock to the balcony, shakes it out softly into the breeze, and says, "Okay, now it remembers me again." That night, he doesn't wear it. He just lays it on his dressing table beside a paper fan and a photo from the show, then folds it once, then again, tucks it away in a pouch labeled in gold Sharpie, Tokyo Soul. Later, you hear a rumor, a quiet one, that a National Museum curator approached Michael's team during that tour, asking if he would consider donating a stage-worn item, preferably something iconic. Michael declined, but privately, he told a friend, they can have the shoes, but not the socks, not Tokyo. Years later, that sock would make a brief appearance in an auction catalog, withdrawn at the last second with no explanation. Some say he changed his mind. Others say the sock was never his to give, that maybe it belonged more to the stage than to the man. You're not sure. All you know is, that sock never made it into the vault in Los Angeles, nor to the fashion archives, nor into any exhibit. It stayed with him, packed carefully, always hand-labeled. And when someone asked him in an interview what item he'd save first in a fire, he didn't say a Grammy. He said, probably a sock. The reporter laughed. Michael didn't. You're in Italy now, somewhere just outside Florence, tucked in a villa filled with sun and silence. Michael is between tours, breathing slower, walking softer, and for once, not surrounded by sound engineers or rehearsal mirrors. The stage is packed away, but one thing never leaves the scene. The sketch pad, not for dance steps, for socks. You're sitting with him on a shaded balcony. He's barefoot, sipping something sweet and cold, and next to him is a spiral-bound book filled with page after page of sock designs, some wild, some classic, all intentional. I like to think in layers, he says, tapping a pencil on a page where he's shaded a design with silver coils and soft arch support. The inside touches the soul, the outside touches the world. This trip, it isn't vacation, it's a fabric scouting mission. Michael is meeting with a small, fiercely private textile family from Como who specialize in silk thread blends. They've made scarves for queens, gloves for opera stars, but socks? Never. Michael leans in across the studio table. I need something that moves like music, but grips like memory. They look confused. He smiles and draws. He starts with the ankle, explains the importance of the curve. Too tight, I can't float. Too loose, the light disappears. He talks heel padding, soft enough for spins, strong enough for landings. Then, with delicate strokes, he sketches a stripe, not down the side, but across the top, a shimmer line. like a comet tail, barely visible unless you know where to look. The tailors nod slowly. They've worked with meticulous people, but never quite like this. They agree to try. 3 prototypes arrive 2 days later. Michael touches each one like it's alive, wears one around the room, hops once, frowns. Too slippery. Tries another, closer. On the 3rd, he spins. Light catches. He stops midair, 1 foot frozen in a point, smiling. This one. That pair would never appear on stage, not on TV, not even on tour. He called them his composer socks, made for movement, not for show. You get to see the rest of the sketchpad later that week. 1 page is filled with diagrams of a show outfit, but instead of the jacket or the hat, it's all sock zoom-ins, light refraction tests, thread height variations, color layering experiments, tiny arrows pointing to phrases like flash angle, ankle bloom, and silent snap. He had even drawn a small stopwatch, marked at the precise moment the sock should enter visibility during a spin. 0.8 seconds after heel turn, 1.2 seconds before spotlight re-entry. Here's your quirky fact for tonight. Michael once hired a fashion student for a single week just to study how different sock materials reflected under 12 variations of stage lighting, from fog to strobes to stadium halogen. They ran tests with a miniature stage model and tiny sock puppets on toothpicks. "I want to see how they glow before I wear them," he'd said. He wasn't kidding. And the shoemakers? Don't get him started. Michael didn't wear socks in a vacuum. His shoes were part of the equation. He had Italian loafers custom molded with sock friction in mind. The interior sole had to be smooth enough for the slide, but firm enough to support the sock's shape. Too padded? The sock sunk. Too rough? The sock grabbed. You once watched him spend 20 minutes explaining to a confused cobbler how the audience's eyes moved in rhythm with his sock flashes. "It's like conducting a symphony," he said, "except the baton is on my feet." And then there's the sketchpad labeled socks only, not for costumes. Inside, nothing sparkly, nothing flashy, just sketches of emotion socks, some with raindrop textures, some inspired by birds, 1 pair with the name Whisper Steps, circled 3 times. When you ask what those are for, he smiles. "Dancing in dreams," he says. Biographers usually credit his jackets or hats as signature pieces, but among his inner circle, it was known. The socks were the real blueprints. The rest just dressed the message. And here's the cultural debate. Some argue his fixation on controlling every stitch, every sock fiber, every shoelace angle, was a symptom of overwork or burnout or trauma. But others believe it was the natural expression of someone who heard music in thread. You watch him go quiet after flipping to a blank page. He sits still for a while, then writes in the center of the page, slowly, "The sock begins the story before I move." It's almost a mantra, a reminder, that before the hand pops, the fedora tips, the bass hits, there's already a conversation happening, just below the ankle. And then he looks up at you and says, "If I could only keep one thing, it'd be the ones no one sees, the ones that know the whole show before the curtain even lifts." You ask what he means. He leans back in his chair, lets the sun catch his bare feet, and says, "The first note in any show isn't a sound. It's the sock hitting the floor." You're back in Los Angeles now, mid-1990s. The glare of the spotlight has started to feel more like a microscope, and the media buzzes like static in the background. Michael moves through the world more cautiously these days, cloaked in sunglasses, long sleeves, mystery. But even now, even under pressure, the socks remain, flashing just briefly under hemmed pants as he steps out of limos, hotel lobbies, courtroom entrances. And people are starting to talk. Not fans, not stylists, critics. Suddenly, those glittering socks aren't just signature flair, they're being picked apart, dismissed as relics, mocked by tabloids. A fashion columnist writes, "Jackson's silver socks are less style and more stubbornness." A late-night host jokes, "They say Michael's socks are the only ones that sparkle more than his lawsuits." You see the headlines, the smirks, the eye rolls, and for the first time you notice, Michael starts adjusting his socks less in public, keeps the flash tucked just an inch deeper under longer pants. Almost like he's shielding them, or protecting something soft inside himself. He reads the articles. You wish he didn't, but he does. He folds one and places it face down in his notebook, then quietly writes underneath, "I wore them to dance, not to be understood." Biographers debate this shift, this quiet pulling inward. Some call it a retreat, others see it as evolution. But you're close enough to know, Michael's socks weren't retreating, they were defending. Because in a world that demanded he explain everything, his face, his silence, his choices, he still had one thing that answered to no one, and it sparkled. He leans on them more than ever now, refuses to do photo shoots without them. At a televised charity gala, he agrees to perform Man in the Mirror, on one condition: the camera must catch his socks in at least 3 wide shots. They make the ending breathe, he says, and he means it. During rehearsals for a private show, a crew member asks why he always starts on the right foot. Michael pauses, then says, "Because the left carries memory, but the right dares." You scribble that one down, and here's your quirky fact for tonight. During the filming of Ghosts, Michael wore a specially designed pair of socks with alternating matte and reflective stripes so that every third frame shimmered slightly, only visible to the camera, not the naked eye. He called it ghost glitter. It wasn't a gag, it was intentional sorcery. You're in a production meeting one day, and someone casually suggests ditching the socks for a darker, edgier look. Just for one number, they say. Michael doesn't speak, just stands up, leaves the room. The idea is never mentioned again. But the moment sparks something else, a ripple that becomes a wave. Michael begins making his socks louder again. He commissions a new set with sapphire-threaded lightning bolts across the top. Not for tours, not for cameras, for himself. Then another pair with golden stars. Then one with the word "believe" spelled in mirror script, so only he can read it when he bends to adjust. You find a note pinned to his dressing mirror one night, written in gold ink. "They want the show, but I'm dancing for the child inside the sock." You don't ask what it means, you know. The socks are armor now, not just sparkle, not just shine, but shields, soft, silent, certain. And here's where the cultural conversation fractures. Some stylists begin citing Michael's socks as retro rebellion. Others call them outdated. A few claim they're no longer iconic, just eccentric. Meanwhile, street dancers and underground clubs start wearing glitter socks in tribute. Online forums pop up, dissecting his footwork, debating which sock gave the best glide. It becomes more than fashion, it becomes folklore. And Michael? He just keeps dancing. He performs "You Are Not Alone" in Monaco, socks twinkling under a soft spotlight. No pyros, no spins, just slow steps and silver flashes. The audience cries. Later, he tells you, "That one was for the critics. I let the socks speak." You're in his closet late one evening, watching him lay out outfits for a video shoot. He passes over 3 jackets, 2 shirts, but not the socks. Those he selects first. He holds a pair of white ones with a faded blue stripe near the cuff, then nods. "These saw me through a hard one." He doesn't say which. You don't press. He just slides them into a protective pouch, zips it closed, and whispers, "Let them rest. They earned it." You realize then, this wasn't about legacy, or nostalgia, or rebellion. It was about consistency. When the world spun faster than he could breathe, the socks stayed steady. They moved when he moved. They sparkled when he asked them to. They didn't ask why. They just shimmered. You're in Neverland now. Not the idea, the myth, the place, the real estate. Acres and acres of whimsy and quiet winding lanes, golden gates, and a train that doesn't go anywhere unless you want it to. The sun is setting just over the ridgeline, and the air smells like cotton candy and eucalyptus. You follow Michael through the garden path behind the main house. He's wearing pajama pants, slippers, and, of course, socks. But not the glittery kind. These are soft, faded, a little pilled from wear. And yet, he walks like he's on stage. He leads you to a small side building tucked near the hedge maze. Not the recording studio, not the theater, the laundry room. And it's nothing like you imagined. No piles, no chaos, just quiet hums and the scent of lavender. On the far side is a long wooden table, and on that table, rows of socks, folded, organized, resting like sleeping performers after a standing ovation. He turns to you with a small smile. "This is where I wake them up." You raise an eyebrow. "Most people just wash clothes down the office. The news in a mile. The news in a mile." He chuckles softly. "Most people just wash clothes. I wake mine." And so begins the ritual. Michael reaches for a pair, thin cotton with a subtle silver heel stripe, and gently shakes them out. He rubs them between his palms, then folds them in thirds, not twos, thirds, always. "If you fold them in two," he says, "they forget the middle of the dance." You watch as he goes sock by sock, laying each one down like a page in a bedtime story. Some he speaks to, some he hums to, some get a small kiss on the toe before being tucked back in the drawer. Here's your quirky fact of the night. He once had a custom wooden drawer built just to house retired socks, pairs that had performed in historic shows and now, as he put it, deserve soft darkness. He never threw them out, not even the threadbare ones, not the ones with torn seams or stained soles, especially not those. The ones that broke mid-performance are the bravest, he says. They never ask to be fixed. They just shine until they can't. He shows you his sorting system. It's not by color or wear or even size. It's by energy. There's a drawer labeled flashers for the loud ones, floaters for the soft ones, whispers for the socks that knew how to end a song quietly, warriors for the ones he wore through pain, and then the lost ones. You hesitate. He notices. Gently he opens that drawer. Inside, mismatched socks, solitary ones whose pairs disappeared in hotels, on buses, in frantic tour wardrobe changes. Some he never found again. But he couldn't throw them out, couldn't quite say goodbye. They danced too, he says, even if just once. And here's something that will stick with you for the rest of your life. Michael Jackson believed his socks had memories. Not superstitions, not spirits, just memory. He said cotton could hold feelings if you moved in it enough. So when he washed them, he didn't bleach them, didn't scrub them. He asked them to let go. You think he's joking. He's not. You once watched him whisper, "Thank you for the spin," before placing a sock in the wash. He explains it later like this. "Everything I wear on stage is part of the rhythm. The second it touches the floor, it starts counting." Biographers never talk about Neverland's laundry room. They talk about the zoo, the theme park, the train. But not this tiny corner of routine, of reverence, of silence. You sit with him on the floor one rainy evening, the socks all freshly folded and stacked behind you. He tells you about a show in Sydney where his ankle locked up mid-spin. He was off by a beat, panicked, almost fell. But the sock caught the light, he says, eyes far away. Just long enough for the crowd to think I meant it. That's when you realize something important. The socks weren't just an accessory. They were co-stars. They covered for him when his body couldn't, distracted when the pain slipped through, told the story when words were too slow. You ask him gently if he thinks anyone ever really noticed. He laughs once, a low, breathy sound. They didn't have to notice. They just had to feel it. That night, before heading upstairs, he pauses at the sock drawer, pulls out a pair labeled Dreamers, a soft shimmer, barely visible. He holds them to his chest for a second, then tucks them under his arm. "Wearing these tonight," he says, "just in case I dance in my sleep." And something in you softens, because in a world obsessed with spectacle, scandal, headlines, and noise, you found the quietest corner of Michael Jackson's world, where the magic lives not in the roar of the crowd, but in a folded pair of socks, resting softly in the dark. It's an unusually quiet afternoon. No rehearsals, no press, no cameras, just sunlight curling through the stained glass windows of a guest house on the Neverland property. Michael's in a soft gray sweater, his hair tucked behind one ear, and in front of him, a flat, square box tied with a satin ribbon. You recognize the moment before he speaks. It's for Elizabeth. Elizabeth Taylor's birthday. You sit beside him as he unwraps it, not like a gift, but like something sacred. Inside is a black velvet frame. Mounted at its center, perfectly aligned, immaculately preserved, is a single pair of socks. Silver-threaded, thin-stretched. The kind he only wore during ballads. There's a note tucked in the back, handwritten in violet ink, the paper just slightly translucent. You catch a glimpse of it as he folds it gently. You're not going to read it, you ask? He smiles softly. No, he says, it's just for her. The socks aren't new, they've been worn. You can see a tiny scuff on one heel, a near-invisible bit of stage tape residue on the arch. These aren't display items, they're memory caught in fabric. She was the first to call them my cloud shoes, he says. Said when I danced, it looked like I never really landed. That stayed with him, and now he wants to give them back to her. Not as a memento, but as a message. Here's your quirky fact. Michael only ever gave away 3 pairs of performance-worn socks in his life. 1 to Elizabeth, 1 to a Make-A-Wish child who asked how he made his feet fly, and 1 to an unknown fan who caught a sock during a rehearsal toss. He never asked for it back. You sit with him as he seals the package and writes, "For E.T." in swirling letters across the ribbon. The courier arrives 2 hours later. Michael hands it over himself, but only after kissing the box once, gently. She'll understand, he says. And she does. A week later, she sends a handwritten reply. They are still dancing. That letter ends up tucked into Michael's sock vault. Later that same evening, you walk with him to the main house. He's quiet until you pass the gold record hallway, and he suddenly chuckles. You ever think about how weird it is? He asks. What is? That I became known for a glove. He lifts his hands and waggles his fingers. But what really did the work? He points down at his socks. The ones he's wearing now are different, soft pink, trimmed with pale silver. He calls them his gratitude socks. He only wears them on days that feel tender. Do they have a hidden message inside? You ask. No, he replies. These are just soft. Not everything needs to whisper a secret. He leans against the wall and crosses one ankle over the other, letting the sock peek out with a wink of light. You ask how he chooses which pair to gift someone like Elizabeth. I don't pick the prettiest, he says. I pick the ones that remember her. He explains that he once kept a list. People, moments, cities, paired with socks that reminded him of them. He called it his emotional wardrobe. 1 sock for joy, 1 for heartbreak, 1 for mystery. Elizabeth? She was stillness wrapped in sparkle. And the socks he gave her? Worn during a performance of Human Nature in Paris. She was in the wings, he recalls. I looked over mid-song and she mouthed, "Don't fall back to earth." I almost missed the next step. He never forgot that. Biographers love to tell stories about diamonds and gowns in Elizabeth's laughter-filling rooms. But they don't mention the time she told Michael that he didn't need to shine to be seen. That the quiet parts of his performance were her favorite. The socks know, she told him once. They carry the hush. That line lived in his head forever. And maybe that's why he never gave her jewelry, or framed photos, or one of his famous jackets. Just the socks. Something that moved with him when no one was watching. Something that listened. That night, you find him alone in the library. He's curled up on a velvet chaise with his legs folded beneath him, reading a book of poems. Barefoot now. The socks from earlier resting neatly on a footstool, still holding their shape. He closes the book and says, "It's funny. I've danced in front of millions, and the only thing that ever really understood what I was trying to say was the socks." You stay quiet. What could you possibly add to that? But he's not sad, not even nostalgic. He's smiling, like a magician who's just finished a show and knows he got away with a trick no one will ever figure out. Because while the crowd was staring at the hat, the glove, the turn, the real magic was happening just above his shoes. You're back where it all began, Los Angeles, 2009. The days are long, rehearsals stretch past midnight, and the This Is It team is working with military precision. Everyone feels the urgency, the comeback, the pressure, the countdown. But Michael's focused on socks. You're in the wardrobe wing of the Staples Center, watching him inspect pairs like he's choosing precious metals. He doesn't rush. He never rushes. He holds a sock to the light, then pulls the cuff gently between his fingers. Too stiff, he murmurs, then tries another. Too loud, and another. He turns it slowly, watching how it reflects under the rig lights. The overhead fluorescents buzz. Crew chatter hums in the background. But for Michael, this is the most important decision of the night. He finds a pair, silver shimmer over warm white, woven with tiny cross stitches at the arch. He smiles, then points. These know the steps already. You grin, because you've heard that before. The rehearsal begins. Cameras roll, dancers stretch, the music hits, and there he is, center stage, calm as a conductor, feet gliding across polished flooring that mirrors every flash. And that's when you see it. Even now, even in his final days of rehearsal, he's still leading with his right foot. Always the right. Just like Motown 25, just like Tokyo, just like the earliest days in Gary, when the socks were still cotton and hope. And when that right sock flashes, time stops. Again. There's something different about these rehearsals. He's gentler, maybe because the stakes feel final, or maybe because in his heart, he knows he's dancing with ghosts, spinning through echoes of himself, past and present. But the socks don't change. They still anchor him, still whisper rhythm, still carry the hush. One night, after a long run-through of wannabe startin' something, he limps slightly off stage. You catch up with him in the dressing area. He eases into a chair and peels off the socks. His left heel is red, swollen. He massages it gently, then folds the socks over his knee. Still good, he says, almost proudly. Didn't slide too far. You ask if he ever worries about the slide failing. He looks up, serious. If it ever fails, he says, it's not the sock's fault. It's mine. You sit with that a while. The production crew documents everything. Stage angles, light cues, pyro timing. But no one documents the sock decisions. No one's writing down which pair was chosen for which run. No one records that. Before every major medley, Michael performs a sock shake backstage. One little flick of the foot to wake them up. But you know, and later, so will the world. Because here's your quirky fact for tonight. Michael had the rehearsal socks for This Is It triple layered. The outer sparkle layer could be replaced, but the cotton base stayed consistent. They were stitched with a tiny tag inside reading MJTF, Final Form. He never told anyone what TF stood for. Some think it was This Finale. Others believe it meant True Flight. One assistant swears he meant the future. Michael never said. He just wrote it, folded it, slid it over his foot, and danced like time was no longer real. On one of the final nights, he's lying on a couch in the quiet room, stage shoes off, socks still on. The lights are low. He's humming to himself, something soft and wordless, a lullaby from no known origin. You ask if he's ready. He opens his eyes, half a smile forming. I've been ready. It's the socks that take convincing. He sits up, slips on his shoes, and stands. And just before walking back into the lights, he does the thing he's done for decades. Reaches down, tugs the pants just enough to flash the ankle. A glint, a beat, then motion. And here's what you don't see in the final documentary. Not in the promos, not in the headlines. Just before the final curtain call rehearsal, when the lights dim and the music swells, Michael stands in a single spotlight. Everyone watching. Crew, band, choreographers. And for a moment, he does nothing. Then he lifts one foot, points the toe. The sock flares. Then he moves. Not with urgency, with certainty. As if every performance in his life has been gently preparing this final pair to land exactly where it belongs. Biographers will write about the comeback that never happened. They'll write about the pressure, the fatigue, the mystery. But they won't write about the socks. They won't write that the last pair he wore on a rehearsal stage was folded that night by hand, placed in a drawer marked simply, same as the beginning. They won't write that the last words he said before walking off stage that night were, I felt the flash. That's enough. But you will remember, because you were there, because you watched the socks land first. You're in a room where time doesn't move. The walls are white, the air is still. The world has just lost Michael Jackson, and the silence is louder than the applause ever was. You walk through the halls of his home, past quiet chandeliers, past rooms that once pulsed with rhythm. But tonight, it's different. Everyone is gone, except you. You step into the room you visited many times before, the one most people never knew about, the sock vault. It's dim now. The automatic lights flicker softly to life as you enter. Nothing has been touched. The drawers remain exactly where he left them. Flashers, dreamers, warriors, rain, lost ones. You kneel in front of the final drawer, the one with the star. Inside, there's a single pair, and stitched into the heel, barely visible unless you hold it to the light, is the final message. I am still dancing. The socks are white. No sequins, no gold, no sparkle, just soft cotton, clean, folded with precision, and resting beside them a note for when they tell the story. You don't cry, not yet. Instead, you touch the fabric, and for a moment, everything returns. The spin, the slide, the flicker, the breath before the downbeat, the way the socks would flash half a second before the move hit, the way they would shimmer like a secret. He always said the socks started the story before he moved. Now they end it too. Here's your last quirky fact. The Smithsonian requested a pair. So did the Grammy Museum. The family sent photos, replicas, tributes. But the real ones? They stayed here. Hidden, held, remembered. You step back from the drawer, close it softly. The light fades behind you, and the story, his story, flickers quietly into legend. The lights are low now, and you feel your breathing begin to slow. Let the imagery soften. Let the shimmer fade. Imagine the feel of soft cotton between your fingers. Imagine the whisper of fabric touching the floor with intention. Imagine one last flicker of silver beneath a spotlight, just before stillness. He's no longer dancing in front of millions, but he's dancing somewhere. Somewhere the pressure is gone, the mirrors are kind, and the socks never fray. You picture him standing in a quiet, endless room. No stage, no noise, just movement, gentle, effortless. A place where no one's watching but the stars. He moves the way only he can, like time isn't real, and the floor is part of the melody. You don't hear the beat, but you feel it. In your chest, in your breath, in the soft pulse of memory. And there, on his feet, are those socks, flashing one more time,